Hi, I'm acting teacher Michael Bean, and this is your free film and TV acting lesson for Monday, May the 2nd. This is for myfreeactingclass.com. If you want to find out more about us, you just go to the website. Here it is, myfreeactingclass.com. If you were like, this is amazing, I want to know more about this, no problem. You can find their video archive there. It'll take you here. A whole bunch of the lessons from last year. And if you click right up here, it'll take you to our YouTube channel where you'll be able to find the most recent lessons, including the 5-part series that I did on keys to kick-ass self-tape. So story, style, relationship, changes, and what does your character want? Now, I keep coming back to this word character. And so today's lesson is the first on building character. My hope is to answer some questions, to show a couple of self-tapes, use as examples. Thank you so much to Natalia and to James, who both submitted self-tapes for us to look at today. Hopefully we'll get to both of them. And to use those as an illustration of some of the basic concepts, and then open it up for questions from you. So I want to start by saying that as far as I'm concerned, character is a construction. That character is essentially an illusion that you are creating in the minds of the audience. I was looking for support material for today's class, and one of the things that I pulled and found is something that I wrote a long time ago. If you were interested in the Confidence on Camera Handbook, this is actually how I got started teaching acting. I had no idea how audacious this was at the time because this was 20 years ago. I was like, I've got good ideas and I like writing. So I literally wrote a book about acting and distributed it to all of the talent agents in Vancouver and was like, here's my book. I have good ideas. Send me your clients. And a couple of them were like, yeah, okay, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about. I'm like, let's send him some people. And here I am still teaching 20 years later. So I think if I'd known more about the industry at the time, I might have been scared to do that because I would have realized how audacious it was. It brings me back to something that Julia Cameron says in her fantastic book, The Artist's Way, which is that it is often audacity and not skill that propels somebody to center stage. I think that there's really something valid, interesting, there, right? Something that's worth thinking about. So let's take a look at, this has gone through, this is the 4th edition of this, but the Confidence on Camera Handbook, which is a free download, by the way. You can find it just by, probably find it just by Googling Confidence on Camera. I really should have a link to it on the My Free Acting Class website. Do I? Oh, I do. Look at that. Great quote from Sanford Meisner, who was one of the folks who helped bring acting into the style of acting that we have now, which is psychological realism, or people using their real feelings. Acting is the ability to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Sanford Meisner, New York City acting guru. Right, so here we go. This is Michael Bean from a long time ago now. The character is you. The history, circumstances, relationships, etc. are different. Ultimately, the character is you. I'll imagine the scene in detail as if you were really there. Use the circumstances of the script to build the imaginary situation that makes you want to do, say, feel the events in the script. Now I stand by that. Duke asked this question about character building a couple of weeks ago, and I've really been thinking about what does this mean to build a character. Folks, folks are often like, I want to build a character. And I think what typically that means is, how do I come across on camera as somebody that fits the story, right? And typically, that means somebody who is different from myself. I think when people say, build a character, they mean like, I want to come across not as me. And here's the thing that I have to say to that is, who you are is highly context dependent. I think that, and I know that I'm getting a little bit technical here, but what I'm really saying is that who you are is different depending on where you are, how much sleep you've had, if you like what you had to eat that day, if you are talking to the police officer that has pulled you over, and you're pretty sure that like you were speeding, who you are is going to come across very different, than if you were talking to your 5-year-old nephew who has just kicked you in the shins, for the 6th time, right? Like, and who you are in that situation. If we just saw 15 seconds of that, in the first one, we're going to get one character, and the second one we're going to get another character. And so this kind of comes back to that top level Sanford Meisner quote: acting is being truthful under imaginary circumstances. So I do think that it can be useful to think about character, to think about how is it that this person is in the world in this script. They are, and then what we want, I think, is to go to the next level of what imaginary circumstances do I need so that even I would behave that way in that situation. And that's where it takes creativity, right? So I'm not saying that character is false or that's not worth thinking about. I'm saying that we need you inside of it. And I've heard this from casting recently, and I've heard this from talent agents. My talent agent, I had a conversation with her. I was like, okay, what have you noticed in several years of self-tapes? Like, what's emerging for you? Like, what are you noticing in terms of trends? Is there anything kind of new and emergent? And she said, if anything, I'm seeing a little bit less kind of Ken and Barbie stereotypes and a little bit more like valuing of uniqueness. That they really want people who are like, have their own kind of weird and different in some way. Yeah. And so I think that is a positive trend. I think that it's something that's really important to like bring into the discussion when we're talking about like building character. So when I'm going to talk through this from a couple of different angles. And I'm going to come back next week having talked it through and answered questions with you, and try and make it a little bit more visual. My hope is to next week go like, hey, remember that thing we talked about? Da, 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 da. If we take that top level, being truthful under imaginary circumstances, and then we're like, okay, what is this person like? And then following that, you're going to find sort of how to be inside it. Okay, so that's one piece, truthful under imaginary circumstances. The other thing is, and this I've said in lessons before, but we'll keep coming back to, in my opinion, you're only going to get paid for the thing that you can make look effortless. I think if the audience sees you trying really hard to do or to feel basically anything, then likely that's not something that you're going to be able to be paid to do. So one of the questions that Dia put in the chat window today, and feel free to throw in more questions, in the chat window as we go, so I can see them, and I'll pause to answer questions live and in person in a minute. Is common mistakes you notice when building characters. And I will say that the most common mistake that I think that I see is folks who are trying to put on a result. They're like, oh, my character's a jerk, so I'm going to talk like a jerk and I'm going to make the jerk face, instead of, okay, what do I need to imagine about this other character? What do I need to imagine about these circumstances so that I get that effect? Okay, so I see people efforting, and in particular, like putting on externals for the character in some way. And so that's probably the most common character mistake that I make, that I see made by actors. How do you make sense of the fact that some actors go and like book their first project? And some actors, will like, audition for years, and sort of try different characters, and not quite, like sort of land in something that is marketable. So there are parts of that we literally don't have control over, but here's the sense that I make out of that, is that there's the essence of who you are as a person, which is very, very broad, right? The idea, like I said, of character is context dependent. That if you get hit by a car, then who you are, is going to be very specific, in that moment. And if you watch somebody else, get hit by a car, and if, like something terrible happens to somebody who's close to you, and if like you get the thing that you most want, or like in each of these situations, if we just take a clip of just that, then anybody watching that is going to be like, oh, this is who Elliot is as a person. And that's the thing that we're taking advantage of. Right. So the essence of who you are is very, very broad, is very, very flexible. And you're human, yourself in all of these different contexts. And then there are all sorts of things you can imagine that even if they haven't happened, you're like, oh yeah, like I have that in me too. Like maybe I'm not ever going to hurt someone, but playing a character who hurts other people, that sounds kind of fun, right? Because nobody's getting hurt in that situation. I'm just playing. Okay. Like, how do I find that in myself? So there's that essence, and often actors will get excited about whatever's the furthest from them. So okay, we've got sort of your essence, and it's like changing, and amorphous. I'm not saying that personality doesn't exist. I'm just saying that, like, if we sort of extend it, I truly think that you could find a context, you could find imaginary circumstances that would work for almost any character, even if it is radically, radically different from the way you move through the world. And then there's the character or characters that you were used to playing, what we might call your social persona. Okay, so your social persona is like, here's who I'm used to being in the world. And so for Michael Biehn, that's like, got elements of like kind and playful, and curious and intellectual. And like, these are things I'm used to being because I don't think about, oh, I'm going to play this character. This is just the way that I'm used to operating with people most of the time. So what that means is I have lots and lots of practice in those characters. They're going to feel really easy to me, and I'm likely going to be able to make them look effortless when I get on camera. Because I've had so much practice with them in my body, or I know them so well in my body, that when I start acting a character like that, I'll be like, oh yeah, it will seem to the people watching, oh, that's just who that Michael Biehn guy is. And that's the experience we want people to have when they're watching a TV show, when they're watching a movie. You don't want them like sort of popping out of it and going, oh, I see what Duke's trying to do there. You want them to just be like, oh, I see who that character is. Like, that's just what they're like. That's just what that person is. As in, the essence of them is that. And so initially, if you get asked to do something that you can imagine yourself into effortlessly, either because it's just something that like you connect with really easily, or you have lots of practice inside of your social persona, those are the characters that you are likely to be the most successful with. And then, okay, so you've got your essence, amorphous, changing, artistic, creative. You've got your social persona. This is who I'm practicing. And then you've got what people want to buy. And this is where it gets complicated, because this is something we have very little control over, but it is real. If you're in the world of film and TV, what people want to buy is relevant. And that's going to be strongly influenced. So even in this sort of new world, or this changing situation where they want somebody who's like unique and different, they still are going to be very, very strongly influenced by what you look like and what you sound like. And so, for instance, one of the things that I run into, when I am being cast, so if I just use myself as an example, so like I said, my social persona, kind, playful, curious, intellectual, but guess what? Bald white guys in film and TV shows tend to be jerks. They tend to be like thugs and bodyguards. And, like, now if I was wanted to like grow my hair out and have like a way receding hairline, then because that looks different and that look has a different like casting profile, then maybe I could go out for like the tech geek, or the like nebbishy professor or something. I prefer to look like this. And so, but I am aware, as an actor, like that is a conscious choice that puts me in this place where my social persona, what I'm used to, and what people want to buy, there is a little bit of dissonance there. Okay, so so we've got like, I can do anything, I'm an artist. We've got like, here's who I'm so used to being that I can just do that without thinking about it. And then there's like, here's what people want to buy. And ideally, you want to see if you can find a way to line those things up. Now, the actors I know who I experience as having like a very broad range of characters, characters that they are that they can step into so effortlessly that I'm like, yes, wow, I believe that person, as the, like extremely kind and gentle, and I believe that person as like extremely cold and forceful, and I believe that person in these different characters that they're stepping into. Absolutely, that is possible. I believe that that is very, very, very strongly influenced by practice. I would say, almost exclusively that that is something that comes with practice. I really believe this idea that talent is practice that other people don't see. So when it comes to character, if you're like, wow, that person's so talented, chances are that, like with, say, athletic performance or music, it's the kind of thing that is long, long, long hours of practice uh, that are just not visible to the person watching. And they may not even be visible to the person who is being experienced as talented. Like, I work with a lot of young people. I started by teaching kids and teens, and I still run a kids and teens film and TV acting school. And when somebody comes in, and I experience them as very skilled right away, once I investigate, I'm like, oh, okay, right. You have brothers and sisters and you've been playing for them for ages. Oh, you're used to being like the clown with your friends. And so you've not only watched like thousands of hours of these comedy TV shows, but this is what you've practiced with your friends over and over and over again, right? That there's something here, you have practice in your body, and practice doesn't have to mean hard work and effort. I think that actors sort of recoil from that idea, or at least maybe because I've worked with young people, I feel I get a lot of like recoiling from the idea of practice, because they think it's synonymous with terrible, uncomfortable effort, right? That practice is like, I don't know, push-ups or cold water immersion or something, and practice can be, like I watch comedy TV shows every day and I'm constantly doing funny voices with my friends, right? Like that can be, like practice and get skill in your body. Theater is excellent practice, because typically somebody who does, especially professional theater, will involve hundreds and hundreds of hours of living inside a particular character. And so once you've put in all of the time to internalize that, and of course you're getting external support in doing that, oh, here's how to imagine it, here's what works, you get to do trial and error, and so often you can find a character that way. If that's not something that's available to time-wise, I definitely know actors who've taken high quality scene study classes, basically given themselves the opportunity to work on high quality theater scenes, often for several weeks, or a month at a time, and just like really do that extra level of, I'm going to get this character in my body and I'm going to explore it. Every time you add something in that you can own, then that gives you the potential, to gives you the potential to be paid to do that, right? So that's the practice. And if you can be smart and line that up with, what do people who look like me, typically get paid to do on TV, which is, again, not a cut and dry. It's not like it's always like this, but there are sort of general trends, that you can figure out just by one of the things that I did, and I would recommend this exercise. Certainly, I found it really valuable. I went through every TV show that was currently casting in my city, in Vancouver, BC. And then I went through every season of that TV show, and I pulled on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, and then I pulled the little thumbnail, right? So the little photo headshot of every bald white guy, every bald bearded white guy, and I just put them all in a folders and labeled them with like, what the character was, right? Because it'll say like guard, or it'll say somebody's name, or and I put those all in a folder so that I could see them all together and go, oh, okay, these do sort of group into categories. It's like there's the military, and then the judges all have beards, and the like the thugs all have like an extra 50 pounds of muscle on me, and so for me, that was the exercise that like helped me figure that out, right? You don't have to sort of intuitively know, or even if you do, I think it's worth doing some investigating. And so I hope I'm making sense to you. If just in terms of review so far, we've got being truthful under imaginary circumstances. And then we've got this idea of, okay, I'm an artist, I can do anything, social persona, what people want to buy, seeing if you can get those to line up. Yeah, and I think that that's sort of my take on character. And so let's see if that holds up when we're looking at a couple of self-tapes that were submitted today. I also just want to quickly make sure that I've answered the questions in here. Okay, so Dia asked a question about stereotypes, playing stereotypes and trying not to. And so this goes down to that idea of playing a result, that, or as an acting teacher, what I would call playing a result, but I really think it's like deciding how you want other people to experience it. Oh, like this character is ditzy, and if I'm on the outside, if I'm looking at somebody else, I might say, oh, this character, like, yeah, gosh, that person's so ditzy. That Michael Biehn guy, total ditz, the over there. But if it's me, if I'm talking about myself, the likelihood that that character experiences themselves as ditzy, very unlikely. And so when it's a stereotype, it's usually it's usually you accidentally, not even thinking about, putting it on from the outside. Oh, I pulled something just for those of you who like really want to geek out and get intellectual about this. Check this out. If you really wanted to geek out, you would look up social constructionism on Wikipedia, and then follow that into, where are we? The concept of self, self-concept. One's self-concept, collection of beliefs about oneself, embodies the answer to the question, who am I? And so if you just wanted to like, this is outside of acting, but is, where you would go to find some people who've like really spent a lot of time thinking about these questions, is there an essential self, or is it something that is constructed, and if it's constructed, like what are the pieces that could go into that? I'm not sure, I sure don't think it's necessary, but if you happen to be an egghead like me, that's one place you could go for more information. And honestly, you don't need to understand all of the theory behind this. You just have to be able to do it. And so right back to Sanford Meisner's, being truthful under imaginary circumstances. And so I would say it starts with like, what is my character like? Okay, 6 simple words or phrases to describe the character. There, and in this, you think about like the way you would describe somebody you met, or somebody or somebody you worked with. Like, oh yeah, okay, he's kind of sleazy and aggressive and mean, and confident and loud. Okay, so I've got like a cloud of things. Now, I don't think of myself as sleazy, aggressive, mean, confident, and loud, and so, and I'm not used to moving through the world that way, but there are situations where I definitely know that I have been experienced by other people in different parts of it. And then situations where I can imagine being experienced by other people, in each of those ways. And so how can I bring those into what I'm imagining out here and in the other people? So that instead of just putting on sleazy on my face and being like, hey, Elliot, I'm playing my idea of sleazy. Instead, I'm bringing in something, right? So like sleazy is a harder one for me. And, so instead I have to be really creative about like, what do I have to imagine about Elliot, so that I seem sleazy? It's like, okay, I'm going to make my character try too hard to be like, I'm going to say that like, I really don't like Elliot, and then I'm just going to force a smile, right? So first I'm like, oh, right, Elliot, somebody I really don't like him. Hey, great to see you. And then I'm going to decide that there's something about Elliot, and this is something, this is a tool that I've used before, where personalizing is like, I've got this feeling or opinion about something, I'm going to put that out there, where I'm going to make Elliot like delicious food, like right. So he's not a person, he's just like, he's a donut. And so I'm like, so he's a donut, I don't like him, I'm going to force the smile and be like, hey, Elliot, you're a donut. And maybe that comes together in my life to be like, ew, there's something just really yucky about that guy. Like there's something kind of like predatory, but also false, right? So I'm experimenting with it until I'm like, okay, I feel like, got a little embarrassed just like, giving you that example, but that's what we're going for as artists, right? There's the ones that are like, oh yeah, this one's really easy for me. So I didn't show you one of those. I showed you one that's a stretch for me because I want to give you the example of like, it's not a perfect system. You're going to have to explore and experiment and find something that feels genuinely honest when you say the lines that are in the script. And that's going to take experimenting. In some situations, it is possible to have a coach say, just do this, and I've seen that work. I've done that as a coach, and I would say that one of the reasons that can feel easy is because then it just collapses the uncertainty. If you're down here in like, I don't know, it's a nebulous artist land, and somebody says, I'm sure, just do it this way. Sometimes it's easier to just commit to that. Okay, great. You be sure for both of us. Does that give you the performance that is the most connected to your truth and your authenticity and your life? No, of course not. Because anybody from outside, no matter how skilled they are, I've been teaching for 20 years, I've been coaching for 20 years, I've really done this, like tens of thousands of hours. And so, and even if I can guess something that will give you the result that we want in your body, if you find it for yourself, it's going to be deeper, it's going to be richer, it's going to be more layered, it's going to be more personal. It just is. So now, Duke's question, where does believability break in the name of doing slapstick? And so I think your question is like, what if you're playing a character in a slapstick show or like a very, very broad comedy? Am I understanding your question right? And so in that situation, I would say, and I've said this before, there's a couple of different ways that I like approaching big, broad comedic characters. One of which is know how young your audience is. So if you're in true slapstick, like if you're, which is rare for TV shows, and tends to be for like Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, where it's like you're the character, you fall off the side of the building, and the next scene is you getting out of a hedge, like spitting leaves out of your mouth, and you go right back into your dialogue after falling 30 feet off the building. So you're like, okay, zero consequences, full slapstick comedy. In that situation, know that you're performing for 5 and 6 year olds and adjust your performance accordingly. Right. So it's believable to 5 and 6 year olds. And so you're like, hey, everything's going to be more clear, and my feelings have to be more clear because you're 5 and you have to understand that I'm grumpy with you, or I'm really nice, but not like I'm nuanced and subtle and have layers, right? So part of the slapstick thing can be you can find it, by finding the audience, and then the other thing that I would say is supportive of that with slapstick characters is enormously strong feelings about stupid stuff. Right. So again, you're still you, but you have huge feelings about stuff that's dumb. Right. So this kind of stuff that like, for us is like, oh my gosh, global warming, or like getting the role I want on the TV show, or like my mom, instead your character has that about like dryer lint, right? Whether they just like hate it or love it. As soon as you bring in something like it and you're like, and you really find the like seething hatred for dryer lint, and that in a slapstick, one of the things technically you can do is make much more abrupt transitions, right? So in life, if you, or in a more dramatic series, if you are full of seething hatred, it's really going to stay with you. And the further you are into pure comedy, the more you can be like, dryer lint, huh? And now I'm going to transition to something totally different. And then maybe I'm going to be pissed off about the dryer lint again. So that is something technical. They're called flips, oh gosh, there's another name for those that's just totally escaping me right now. Turns, a flip or turn. If you want to like Google, I wish I could point you at like this book or this article, but there isn't one that I found that it's like, oh yeah, this really like gives it detail. Flips or turns, very, very common in comedy. So it's a more nuanced answer. I don't think that we ever let believability go entirely. We just adjust for a different audience. Now I actually made a mistake with this. In like earlier in my career, I was cast as the lead in an independent film that was a noir, like there was like a gritty noir, sort of like detective, and I read the script after I got it, and I was like, wow, the script is super cheesy, and I just can't handle it. Um, hey director, how do you feel about suggestions? And so I went through and I made tons of suggestions and like edited a bunch of the language out of the script, and he was like very, very open to it, because he was just like a collaborative, creative human. And then later I watched it, and the one person in the show who I was just like, boom, that guy, he looks amazing, is the one who just like leaned into the cheese all the way. Like it was a noir show, and the one guy was like, I'm going to use the voice, and I'm going to lean back in my chair, and I'm going to make all the gestures. And I was like, he looks amazing. I look like I don't know what I'm doing because I didn't understand the style of that show, right? So, so this idea of believability, we talk about it like it's a global thing, but I don't think believability exists outside the style of the show. Does that make more sense, Duke? Okay, great. And so I share my mistakes, so hopefully you don't have to make them. This is one of the reasons why I lead with style is like story and then style, right? If you don't understand the style, you can go through an entire like elaborate, creative, artistic building of character and be way off base, and not be anything like what the producers want to buy. And can you control for that? No, but like you can at least understand the style of the show that you're in. All right. I think those are the questions here. Now, before I move on to showing you some self-tapes and seeing if we can, extract a little bit about character, by looking at the self-tapes, do any of you have questions about anything that I've talked about in the lesson so far? Okay. So here's a self-tape from Natalia. This one's really interesting because this one was improvised, and this does come up with auditions periodically. She said, I got a self-tape for a feature film last week. Part as a housekeeper, horror film. She taped, and then they got her to retape. They sent her notes and were like, we loved it. Do it again with these notes. Casting office, first one. They said, speak in English. Don't try to speak well. Maria is not American. Imagining you're interviewing for a job as a cleaning lady. You introduce yourself in English. My name is Maria. I'm XX years old. I came from XX. So, improvise this, make this up. At the end of the interview, you imagine the woman giving the interview, Mrs. Elizabeth, tells you she no longer needs your services. It is at this time to play the surprise, the astonishment, and then the acceptance. And so you end the job interview. And so here's Natalia like taking all of that and doing in 58 seconds, doing her take on the character. And remember that they liked this one well enough. They were like, yeah, take these notes and try it again like this. So this comes up, in class all the time. And I just love it when I can say, look, here's a concrete example of something. Like the tape is not perfect. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to be close enough to what they're looking for. It has to give them some sense of you and the character. It makes them say, yes, okay, here's something interesting for our story. So you can see that she's Natalia's always like shooting in different places as her husband like move around the world, or often it's like in hotel rooms. She's got a relatively neutral background, right? There's a little bit of pattern on the wallpaper. Is it a big deal? No. Is her lighting? She's got a little bit of eye light. Could her lighting be better from the front? Of course. Did it matter in this case? No. She got a callback, or they asked her to retape for it. So she's in a medium close up. We're seeing the top of her head down to just below her armpits. She's in the middle of the frame. It's horizontal, neutral background, all of those self-tape things.
My last working experience was at Portuguese embassy here in New York. I worked there for 3 years, and it was a very nice experience. I'm still in touch with them. The madam name was the same as mine, Maria. So it was very nice. She called me Maria. The recommendation letters are from there. Sorry, so you don't need my services anymore? May I ask what happened?
Natalia, just a heads up that you fell into a classic trap of improv, which is asking questions, especially if you're improvising by yourself. Anytime you hear yourself ask a question, you got to immediately answer it. And especially if you're like auditioning, for film, TV, and improvising, the other thing you could do is just imagine, that there is like a one-word answer, but like basically, in the absence of somebody else speaking, if the camera's just on you, if at all possible, avoid asking questions, because then you find yourself in this trap that you've got here, of listening and reacting to something that is not actually happening. And it just sort of puts this like laser beam focus on what your reactions are, and it's a place where the sort of believability of the scene, is often put to the test.
Okay. Should I leave today? All right. Thank you.
Okay, so there's Natalia's self-tape. She then got these notes. Be more simple. Don't force yourself to smile. Right. So what does that say? Does it say that she forced herself to smile? No, but that's what casting thought. They were like, oh, there's something about that smile that seems like she's efforting for it. So be more simple. Don't force yourself to smile. When you introduce Maria, be super natural. Anytime you get a note like we want it to natural, believable, do less, it just means that something that is coming across almost slightly effortful. So Natalia, if you're watching this, and I know Natalia like always watches, the way that I interpret that is that it means that they're experiencing something as slightly effortful. Now, in the context of today's character situation, Natalia's just leaning into her actual accent. She's not a character. She's not somebody who's trying to put on a fun accent because she just really likes Russian accents. She actually has, a like authentic Slavic accent, and she is just leaning into it a little bit more. And the last thing that she got cast in, was with the accent. In fact, maybe the last several things that I've seen her get cast in, were with the accent. When actors, right, they get excited about like the sort of especially the outer edges of that, like the essence of a person. And so actors are always coming in like, oh, I love accents. I love doing great, good. Keep loving them. If you want to be hired to do them, you've got to practice it so much that we absolutely believe that that's just how you talk all the time. And that is going to take practice. And I know actors who can do that. Like I know actors who can do that just because they're like, oh yeah, well, this particular accent, I just do with my friends always. Like, so I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours just like going to bars and talking in this accent and like being a goof with my friends. And I've just like utterly internalized it. This is easier for some people than others, but in general, you're only going to get hired for something that you can make seem effortless. So especially as film and TV like gets more like more global than it used to be, where if you're in Canada, they can hire anybody across Canada without a work permit. If you're in the US, they can hire anybody from anywhere across the US without a work permit. If they want it to be believable, why would they not just hire somebody from somewhere who actually speaks that way? Right. So if it's something that gives you joy, by all means do it. I don't want to discourage you from practicing. I would just say, do not count on accents to be your bread and butter, unless that's something that like comes so easily to you, or that you love so much that you're like just really putting in that time. And that goes for folks with an accent who want to do what is called a standard American accent. Like that's a conversation that I haven't had here for a while, but if you want to be believed as like, this is just how I want to talk, if you have, say, like a thick Australian accent and you want to get to standard American, it is going to take a lot of practice. For some reason, Australians, at least the ones I've met in Canada, are the ones who put in that work. And so that's like, so I have several students who like speak with an Australian accent, and when they slip into standard American, you would never know. You're just like, oh yeah, this is just how they talk all the time. Right. So I don't know what it is they're doing in Australia in their training, but the folks who who've taken my professional adult film and TV class, I've had a couple from Australia who like really put in that time. So when somebody's like, I've got an accent, like, what do you think? I'm like, it's going to take regular scene study and working with a voice coach, and it's going to take at least a year, of practice. And you're gonna have to figure out like how to engage with that in a way that you enjoy, that doesn't feel like so hideously effortful that you just want to quit acting, right? But it's gonna take time before you can get hired like that, probably. Here's Natalia's retape. So again, the notes were: be more simple, don't force yourself to smile. When you introduce Maria, be supernatural. When you realize she isn't looking after a cleaning lady, be more surprised. She doesn't understand. She's astonished, but she understands.
My name is Maria. I am 32 years old. I'm from Belarus, and I'm looking for a job as a housekeeper. You're not looking for a cleaner? But my friend told me you are. Okay. I understand.
And so Natalia, the choice that you made here to cut in the middle, I think is one of the things that hurt the performance a little bit. And probably they just hired somebody with brown hair. They were like, we love her, but we're going to hire somebody who's like taller, shorter, has brown hair. We're not going to obsess about like why they didn't book you, or maybe they did book you and I just don't know yet, and you haven't heard yet. If you were going to go and redo this tape, or if we were workshopping it, I would say it is more challenging to do it without the like cut fade to black in the middle, but that's going to make it more interesting because there's going to be more change, right? Seeing you be in that place of like hope and ease, and then get the bad news and go, oh, okay, now I'm just going to spend 30 seconds talking to you and have to deal with that shock and surprise, just that change from one thing to the other, just letting the hope go, or letting, the initial piece of the scene go. It's going to read to people as, like a bigger acting choice. And so if we were sort of doing this as a prepared improv, I would say, okay, here's 30 seconds of intro. About the 30-second mark, she's going to say, actually, we're not looking for a housekeeper, goodbye. And then you're going to spend 30 seconds, not asking questions, but like, dealing with that. We do a couple of takes of that and look for like a continuous take. I might showcase you just as like a smidge better. Okay, James, thank you for sending your tape, and I'm going to save it for next week, when I'm able to, like get visual about some of these things around character, and kind of put these ideas hopefully in a format, that will make a little bit more clear sense. Thank you, everybody, for showing up live and in person today. Do you have any more questions before I wrap today's lessons on character? I know that I did that thing that I normally do, and I took a simple question and then I went like, and answered it from like a bunch of different angles and brought in a bunch of different things and a bunch of different nuance. But honestly, like that's the way that I feel about acting. I feel like simple answers are good for selling workshops, but they are not reflective of the actual art form that we are trying to participate in, which is this like very strange mix of like artistic, creative, and business. And it's this sort of like meeting in the middle of those. Questions? All right. Any books? Oh, okay. So specifically for imaginary circumstances, the books that I'm currently reading. Okay, yeah, here we go. I'm currently reading a book called How Emotions Are Made, and it is blowing my mind. Fascinating book in terms of breaking apart this idea that there are like specific ways emotions are communicated, which in these lessons I've talked about, like, here's the research that says that there's these basic feelings. Turns out not supported by the neuroscience at all. Turns out that like there is no, everybody who feels angry has their heart rate go up, or their blood pressure go up, or this part of their brain lights up. Instead, there's this like sort of range of things that goes with anger, which when you think about it in real life, like, yeah, sometimes anger looks like, but sometimes it looks just like somebody's dead, and you're like, oh dang, that person's really angry. And sometimes, especially on the West Coast in Canada, it looks like this, and you're like, hey, oh, okay, sure, yeah, whatever you need. I just hate you inside right now, and you can kind of tell in my voice in this, but like, but instead I'm going to be really nice because I hate you so much right now. Like and so how emotions are made. The author is escaping me in this moment. Something I'm reading right now. Little plug for Sanford Meisner has some books. It's been quite a while since I read one of his books, but if you wanted to go and read some of that nice source material, he's the guy who said acting is being truthful under imaginary circumstances. And Ivana Chubbuck, speaking of certainty, like I think when she teaches, there's maybe a little bit too much certainty for me. But in terms of her ideas about like how to construct those imaginary circumstances and go and make that jump from, okay, here's what I think my character is, to here's what I'm making the world into, here's what I'm imagining out there so that I will get that result. Very, very clear, very concrete. And so that's Ivana Chubbuck's The Power of the Actor. If y'all haven't, Power of the Actor. And there are, I think, 2 lessons. If you went to the YouTube channel and just wrote Chubbuck or Ivana, you would get the 2 lessons from last year that I did specifically on her book that go through some of those steps in detail. And then I'll find the author of that book for you, Dia, and throw further recommendations onto the end of next week's lesson. If you are enjoying what's happening here and you're like, man, this Michael Bean guy, I love his ideas and you want him to be able to keep doing things in the world, how would I help make that happen? Well, I'm so glad you asked. If you wanted to find out more about coaching with me, or classes, then you could find that right here, michaelbean.ca. You just do Michael Bean acting, and you put it into Google and it'll show up, classes and coaching and contact. And if you want to participate in the free acting lessons and send us a self-tape for review, just go to myfreeactingclass.com, right here, info@myfreeactingclass.com, click on that link and send us an email with your self-tape. We'd love to review those. And thank you to the actors who have, I think everybody here in this lesson has sent a self-tape before. Yes, practice. That's how you get there, people. You're doing it. Thank you for joining me. Again, I'm Michael Bean. Keep up the good practice, and I will be here every Monday from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, UTC -7 for my friends in Europe. Okay. Bye, everybody.